As you know, Bernie Sanders is out on the campaign trail, and he is really appealing to the younger crowd on the left. He's talking about, the greedy corporations exploiting the middle class and how all power is being centralized into the hands of the corporations. And he's talking about the wealth gap between, the 1% and the people down at the bottom. And he seeks to use government as a means to try to close that gap. One of the ways that he is wanting to close the gap is to raise the minimum wage. But the question is, can you really close the gap by raising the minimum wage? Free market economists will argue that minimum wage increases lead to unemployment. So, if that's true, then you must ask the next question in the logical process is, how does making a person take $0 per hour close the income gap? So, on the free market or on the market, the raising the price of a good causes less people to buy it. It's simply an economic law. If you raise the price of, say, a Toyota Corolla from, I'm just going to throw a number out there, say 14,000 to say 25,000, people are going to be less likely buying Toyota Corollas. If, for instance, you were going to buy a car and you had $25,000, would you rather buy a Toyota Corolla or would you rather buy a bottom line BMW? Those are the things that people don't really see when it comes to these minimum wage laws. So price controls, which is a minimum wage, which is the nature of a minimum wage law. Price controls either A, lead to shortages, or B, they lead to surpluses. When a price control at the top, they tend to lead to shortages. The price controls at the bottom tend to lead to surpluses. For instance, like in the 1970s when they had gas shortages because of price controls. What happens is the supply of a good and the demand of a good equal what the price is on the market. The demand is, derived from the subjective values of all the acting individuals in the market, and the supply of the good, when those two interject, you have the price. So when the government comes in and it says to, producers or sellers of a good, you cannot sell a good above a certain price. What happens is the demand is there, but the supply is low. So instead of the price being, say $5 a gallon, say the price, if left to the free market for gas, would be like $10 a gallon because of supply shortages. And the gasoline going to where it's most valued, when people would pay $10 a gallon for it, the government comes in and says you can't sell it above $5. Well, now everybody and their brother goes and buys the gasoline, and next thing you know, you're out of gasoline. Nobody has it because it was already in limited supply. And now that the government came in and said to the producers that they can't charge more, everybody went and bought it, and now you're out of it. Conversely, when you have price controls at the bottom, like a minimum wage, you end up with surpluses. Now, for this example, I always like to use banjos. I play music and I like to play banjo, and it hits a little home to me. So I like to use this as an example. First, let me back up and say this. You can't just classify all goods in like a big bundle, a big group, right? You can't just say all banjos, right? You have like different variations of banjos. Like you have the ones at the bottom that are like $200 that are usually imported. Very low quality wood, very low quality metal. They don't have any tone rings in them. And then you have like high end or mid grade, banjos. So you can't just classify all banjos, even like gasoline. You can't classify all gasoline together because you have like the low grade or the standard grade, you have the mid grade, and then you have the premium stuff, and they all have different prices. So it's the same thing with banjos. So you can't classify all of these different things into groups. The law of diminishing marginal utility, each person puts a value on an individual good versus a whole class of goods. So when, let's say the government came in, and this time it said to consumers that you are so greedy. Let's say the banjo producers and the banjo sellers went to the government and got a law passed. They were the ones behind the minimum price on the banjo. They were successful, and the government came in and just said to all the people that are looking to buy banjos that you cannot pay more than $1,200 for a banjo. What would happen? Well, all of the $200 banjos or $250 banjos that are imported that have, not very good wood, all the things I described, they would be pushed out of the market. Because if you have to spend $1,250 on a banjo, if you're going to buy one and you have to spend $1,250, are you going to spend the $1,250 on a imported banjo with bad wood, or are you going to buy a handmade American one that has, say, a mahogany neck, a maple rim, a rolled brass tone ring? Which one are you going to buy? If you have to spend $1,250, which one are you going to buy? Of course, you're going to buy the higher grade one. So now what you have is you have a surplus of low grade banjos that are going to sit on a shelf somewhere, and they're not going to be bought. They're just going to be idle. And this is exactly what happens with minimum wage laws. So the government comes in and it tells business owners, because business owners, they're sort of like consumers, right? They go out onto the market and they buy labor. Labor is, a good to a business owner, just like any banjo or any gallon of gasoline to a consumer. So labor has a marginal utility to it, and labor also cannot be classified into groups of things. You have to break it down. Now, I'll just, for time's sake and conversation's sake, I'm going to say that there's very low-skilled workers or very low-skilled laborers. There's, say, mid-grade laborers, and then there's the very skilled laborers like doctors and engineers and that. So when the government imposes a minimum wage and say, the current minimum wage is $7.50, so they want to raise it to $15 an hour. Say you're a sandwich store owner, you're McDonald's, or any restaurant, or anybody that's using marginal workers. If the government comes in and says you cannot pay $7.50 an hour for help, you have to pay $15. What happens? It's the exact same thing that happens with the banjos. The lowest skilled workers get pushed out of the market, because if you have to pay $15 an hour for labor for a worker, are you going to take the guy off the street with a GED, or are you going to take the guy off of right out that is unemployed who has a college degree? Right? Because the guy who is unemployed that has a college degree would never dream of taking a McDonald's job paying $7.50 an hour. But now that McDonald's is paying $15 an hour, it's a little bit more attractive to him, right? So now what you have is you have higher skilled people who are competing with lower skilled people for the jobs that the lower skilled people could once get. And again, if you're a sandwich store owner and you can afford it, which, you know, people do work on razor thin margins. A lot of people can't afford it and they end up having to just lay people off anyway. But if you can, which person are you going to take? Are you going to take the more skilled person? Or are you going to take the guy with the GED? Of course you're going to take the more skilled person. And so this is how the lowest skilled people are harmed by the minimum wage. So is it true that Bernie Sanders' plan, along with all the other Democrats, but is it true that Bernie Sanders' plan to raise the minimum wage is a good thing that will close the widening economic gap between the top and the bottom? I say no. That's the Liberty Minute. Thanks for listening.